Hey, welcome back to Morning Joe. With us now from the White House, NBC News chief White House correspondent and political director and host of the Daily Rundown, Chuck Todd. In Washington, we've got moderator of Meet the Press, David Gregory. And here on set, contributing editor for Newsweek and the Daily Beast, David Frum. He's out with a new ebook put out by Newsweek titled Why Romney Lost and What the GOP Can Do About It. He is an extraordinarily fast writer, very prolific. I know that he just dreamed this up on Wednesday. The ebook's out by Friday. That, my friend, is ruthless efficiency of the first order.
Exactly.
So please let us know, since you've had all this time to ruminate, why did Romney lose?
You have to take the measure of the problem. It's not just that Romney lost, it's that in 6 presidential elections, the GOP has lost the popular vote in 5. Right. In 2010, there was a Senate majority in reach. It was thrown away with 4 bad nominees. Just contrast, in the 6 elections up through 1988, the Republicans won 5, and even including the losses, and including the 3-way race of 68, they won an average of 52.5% of the vote. What has happened is, over a generation, a once-majority party has become a non-majority party, and immigration is not the fix. It's part of the fix. But the real story of this election and of the past half dozen is that the Republican message is no longer relevant to middle-class America.
What was Mitt Romney's message?
What was Mitt Romney?
Did he have a message?
Yeah.
What was it?
Mitt Romney's message is, I am going to take away Medicare from everybody under 55. I'm going to cut Medicaid from for everybody by about a third. And I'm going to do that in order to finance a giant tax cut for me and my friends. And the reason I'm doing that is because half the country contribute nothing to our national endeavor. Okay. That's his message.
Well, you know, if you put it that way, David Gregory, maybe it's not as unifying a message as the Republican Party once thought. Now, actually, there are a lot of people that are going to be wringing their hands and talking about why the Republican Party lost. A lot of talk about demographics, but I boil it down to this. They can't figure out how to make their message relevant to an 18-year-old Latino voter, but they can figure out a way to make it relevant to a 65-year-old white guy in the South. Yeah. I mean, right, if you believe in conservatism, you believe, like I believe, and I'm sure like David believes, that it's relevant to all Americans.
Well, and I disagree with David a little bit in this respect. I think immigration is more than just a policy. I think it's a cultural issue. It's a tone issue. I think a lot of how Republicans, including Mitt Romney, ended up talking about immigration was, frankly, inhumane. It's talking about self-deportation, not talking about, in a compassionate way, about families that are coming to this country to survive, to help families back home, and really sort of understanding what immigrants contribute to the country. President George W. Bush, he understood that. He understood it as a candidate. He understood it as a conservative. He understood it as a president. And because of his own political standing at the time, that he was able to really get to immigration reform, and opposition from within his own party wasn't able to actually pull it off. But I think a lot of this is tonal, whether it's the Murdochs and the Aikens talking about rape or talking about abortion. I think the party sounds to a lot of voters like it's antiquated. And then I think this real debate over size and scope of government is one that takes some doing if you're actually going to go out there and win that debate, even though there's a lot of folks within the party who are more libertarian, and that may be a view that's even growing.
Well, and the thing is, David, I think makes a great point. If you're going to make the argument for smaller government, you better understand the philosophical groundings of that worldview. Mitt Romney never seemed to get it on a gut level like Thatcher or Reagan did.
Look, since the loss of the election, we have heard an enormous amount of discussion from Republicans on television, in newspaper op-ed columns about immigration as an issue and the tone. And I don't disagree with anything David Gregory just said. But all of us who are allowed to participate in this conversation, we all have health insurance. And the fact that millions of Americans don't have health insurance, they don't get to be on television. That it is maybe a symptom of a broader problem and not just the Republican problem, that the economic anxieties of so many Americans are just not part of the national discussion at all. I mean, we have not yet emerged from the greatest national catastrophe, economic catastrophe, since the Great Depression. And what are we talking about? The deficit and the debt. And these are important problems, but they're a lot easier to worry about if you are wealthier than you were in 2008, which most of the people on television now are again, if you are securely employed, which most of the people on television now are. But that's not true for 80% of America. And the Republican Party, the opposition party, needed to find some way to give voice to real, urgent economic concerns held by middle-class Americans. Latinos, yes, but Americans of all ethnicities.
But hey, so Chuck Todd, we were talking about the realities that we're going to be facing all of these leaders. John Boehner 2 years ago was told, oh, you've got to strike a deal by people in the media. You've got to strike a deal. You've got to strike a deal. John Boehner was the speaker of the most successful majority party since 1946 for the Republicans. We won a historic landslide in 2010. How does that change? How did the dynamics change for John Boehner? Do you agree that he is more empowered 2 years later to go back to his caucus and strike a deal?
I assume he is, but I don't know if he can do it. And that's a great, I think the next 3 months are going to be fascinating to watch. Does Boehner have the guts to go and bring a compromise deal to the House floor that won't get a majority of his Republican conference? Does he have the guts to do that if the Senate comes up with a compromise that gets 65 votes, gets 10 Republicans on board? Does he have the guts to do something like that? I don't know. I mean, another part of this Republican hand-wringing that I'm surprised we're not hearing about is, a lot of the reasons why, for instance, Republicans lost Senate seats, didn't gain them, but lost them. Forget what happened 2 years ago in 2010 when they didn't win as many as they could have. They lost Senate seats, which is still the biggest surprise, I think, of this election. Not Obama winning, not the Republicans holding the House, but the Democrats actually gaining Senate seats. And it was because of this fear that the so-called leaders of the Republican Party, Mitch McConnell and John Boehner back in the last 2 years, and John Cornyn, every decision they make is done out of, well, we're not going to do anything because we don't want to rile up the base. We don't want to rile up the base. So they've catered to the base so much that it's alienated the party away from swing voters.
Chuck, it really is. Following up on what Chuck said, David Gregory, you go back and look at the Senate results and look at the fact, as John Cornyn said, that the Republicans got hammered in every region and in every ideological wing. And it really is. It's just a devastating defeat for the Republican brand. You can't just blame this on one man. You can't just blame it on Mitt Romney. This was a total, absolute loss.
Well, it was, and I think that one of the things that I heard the president say on election night was that if there's a mandate for the second term, it's a mandate to get things done to make government work better, which is different than I just won and you lost, and therefore this is my agenda. They essentially did that the first go-around, and there was a big political cost by the midterms. It did empower conservatives, a new brand of conservatism, really fortified by the Tea Party, and Speaker Boehner made his caucus much more difficult. I think things have changed here, but they can change for certain if the president's approach is that my mandate is for us to achieve something. There is so much tension that has built up to this point where the fiscal cliff hangs over all of these legislators that I think there's room for the president to make it very difficult for not just Boehner, but for his base not to go along with some sort of balanced approach, because I do think that that is a big part of what these results are. The idea of some kind of balance in the approach, Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
You know what sort of shocks me? 15 years ago, had the Republicans gotten the results that they've gotten, the leaders of the Senate Republicans would be asked to step aside. They'd be saying, you know what, you've had your chance, you blew it, 2 cycles in a row, you blew it, and we're in the position we're in. I find it striking that's not happening. I mean, not only that, Mitch McConnell's likely to get reelected as Senate Republican leader,
why is
and
that,
John
Chuck?
Cornyn, and John Cornyn's going to get promoted.
But Chuck, you know, if you're making the argument against Mitch McConnell, you're probably making the argument from the more conservative wing of the Republican Party.
Which is right.
It is Jim DeMint that would be making that argument. And we've talked about losers in this campaign. You want to look at the candidates that Jim DeMint backed in the primary process?
Right. Well, no, but if I were Bob Corker or Lamar Alexander or some of these other legislative, Rob Portman, what I call conservatives that actually want to legislate, right? There's sort of two wings of the Senate Republican Conference these days. You're legislating conservatives and you're conservatives that just want to blow up the process, Rand Paul, Jim DeMint, folks like that. I would wonder if Mitch McConnell's approach over the last 2 years was the right approach, because that approach didn't work. That's my point here. And the question is McConnell going to change his approach in negotiating and in dealing with the president and in dealing with Harry Reid and in dealing with John Boehner, or is he going to go down the same road? McConnell's up for re-election. He's got to worry about a primary challenge. He's got to worry about a general election challenge. I'm just saying it is curious to me that McConnell actually is not getting touched here.
I agree with Chuck. It's a bit of inside baseball, but Cornyn getting promoted is an unbelievable thing, given what happened. I'm a fan of John Cornyn's, but his record in the Senate races speaks for itself, and the fact that people are just saying, yeah, let him move up.
Except for the fact people inside the Senate know that John Cornyn did not want Todd Akin to win the primary. John Cornyn did not want Murdoch to win the primary. But
some of his candidates did lose as well.
Yeah.
David Frum, you talk about the issues, health care and appealing. Part of the comeback for the Republicans has got to involve leadership, though. Where can it come from? Presidential candidates in waiting? Senators, governors? Who can lead the Republican Party now?
I believe the Republican Party has a party of followership. The problem with Republican leaders is that they're cowards, but that they're not that they're fundamentally mistaken. The real locus of the problem is the Republican activist base and the Republican donor base. They went apocalyptic over the past 4 years. And that was exploited by a lot of people in the conservative world. I won't soon forget the lupine smile that played over the head of one major conservative institution when he told me that our donors think the apocalypse has arrived. That Republicans have been fleeced and exploited and lied to by a conservative entertainment complex.
Wait. I want you, and I'm dead serious, I want you to slowly repeat this, because I'm reading the new Manchester biography on Winston Churchill, and I'm hearing about how the French kept calling Churchill as the Germans were pouring through the line and racing towards Paris, and the French generals reassuring Churchill day after day, week after week, that the French were putting up a brave defense when they knew the war was already lost. Please slowly repeat what you just said, and hopefully conservatives will go back and look at what commentators and websites said over the past 3 weeks when they knew this race was lost.
They have been, I'll say it again in exactly the same words, that the conservative followership has been fleeced, exploited, and lied to by the conservative entertainment complex.
Name names.
And because of that, I name names in the book.
But, I don't think that's even necessary.
And and there are too many to name. But because the followers, the donors, and the activists are so mistaken about the nature of the problems the country faces. The nature, just a simple question. And I went to Tea Party rallies, and I would ask this question. Have taxes gone up or down in the past 4 years? They could not answer that question correctly. Now, it's true, taxes will go up if the president's reelected, and that's why we're Republicans. But you have to know that taxes have not gone up in the past. Do we spend $1 trillion on welfare? Is that true or false? It is false, but it is almost universally believed. That means that the leaders have no space to operate. And we will, what happened to Mitt Romney could have been a really good president. Really good. What happened to Mitt Romney was he was twisted into pretzels. The people who put the cement shoes on his feet are now blaming him for sinking.
Well, and he would never stand up to the most extreme voices. I made you repeat that because, again, conservatives have been lied to. They've been lied to by people who engage in niche marketing and make tens of millions of dollars engaging in niche marketing. And I'm a capitalist. God bless them. They can do whatever they want to do. But that's not an electoral strategy. That's a business strategy for them. David Gregory, thanks so much. Who do you have Sunday on Meet the Press?
Well, we're going to talk about how the president governs the next 4 years. We'll talk to Senator Schumer and Coburn to get us started on that.
All right. And Chuck, thank you as well.
You got it, buddy.
Who do you have on the Daily Rundown? Is that a trick question this morning, or are you good to go?
I'm good to go. We got Tim Kaine, new senator-elect from Virginia. I think those Virginia leaders are going to always play an interesting role in the Senate.
A huge role. All right. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. David Frum, thank you as well. Your new ebook is Why Romney Lost and What the GOP Can Do About It. Still ahead, does President Obama now hold all the cards in Washington? Bloomberg Businessweek's Josh Green asks that question in his new column, and he joins us straight ahead.